welcome to the Grand Rapids Planning Commission. We have, I think, 5 items on our agenda today, so just to give you a minute about the procedures, if you haven't been here before, we will start out with our staff, planning staff, giving us a synopsis of the application and zoning issues around that. Then ask the applicant to also give their description of the project and answer any questions we might have. And then there's an opportunity for the public to speak. They can come up to the microphone. If you are doing that, give your name, and we limit your comments to 3 minutes. Then we will have more comment maybe from the developer if there's questions to answer, followed by our discussion and determination. The resolutions are prepared ahead of time, both for us to adopt or not adopt, to make sure that we cover all the standards that need to be stated in that resolution. So with that, and then there will be an opportunity at the very end of the meeting for anybody to speak on non-agenda items or things that they may want to give us input about. So with that, we will start with our first agenda item, which is 801 Michigan. You may have noticed on some of the agendas that there was an item for 1728th Street that's been postponed.
We actually need a motion to postpone.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
So can I get a motion to postpone 1728th Street application?
To August 8th.
To August 8th. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
So moved, I'm sorry.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Conflict of interest. Does anybody foresee a conflict of interest on any of the items today? Hearing none, I guess we can proceed then. Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you. See the conflict.
The first item on the agenda is a request for 801 Michigan Street Northeast. The applicant is requesting approval of a recreational marijuana retailer. The applicant proposes the establishment of this use in the western suite of an existing strip center at 801 Michigan Street Northeast. And this is before you today because marijuana retailers in the TNTBA zone district require special land use approval. I do want to say at the outset that the applicant did submit proof that there are no other uses, there are no sensitive uses within a 1,000-foot radius, and there are no other marijuana uses within that separation distance as well. So that allows them to proceed with this application. The subject site is in the TNTBA zone district. It's at the corner, the northeast corner of Eastern and Michigan Street. In the TNTBA zone district, we have 2 residential zone districts to the north, an MDR and LDR zone district. There are some residential uses, sort of kitty corner to the northwest there. And we also, right off the screen, right, where I'm pointing, there are some residential uses within this adjacent site. That's a multiple family, they're second floor residential units. We also do have residential to the southwest in this mixed-use building. The site's about 18,000 square feet and is improved with a building of about 6,700 square feet with a 25-space parking lot. There is one other use in the building right now, which is the Grand Coney, which is a 24-hour diner. The suite in question was previously occupied by Metro phone store. The building does contain a significant amount of windows, as you can see here, and also contains 2 non-conforming pylon signs. And I just bring that up to let you know that they're non-conforming, but there are no other site changes proposed, so the property owner has rights to maintain them. The suite proposed to be occupied by the applicant is about 1,250 square feet. They don't propose any exterior changes to the building or site other than possibly painting, according to their plans. I do want to mention that the windows appear to be tinted. They've been that way for quite a while. You can see that in these Google Street View photos from a couple of years ago. The Grand Coney's windows are also tinted, but except for the windows that I'm pointing out here. And you can see through those. The remainder of them are tinted. So that might be something that the Planning Commission wants to take into consideration. Other than that, the amount of windows does meet the transparency, the amount of windows required for the zone district. There's over 60% or about 60%. Relative to the floor plan, the applicant will be using the existing door. Patrons will walk in. There will be reception to the left. There will be a restroom to the right that will be accessible to the public, and there is a waiting room. I do want to point out that the waiting room is fairly narrow. It's about 6 feet in width, with a clearance of only 4 feet, where there's looks like a structural element. Folks would enter the sales floor through this door sort of in the middle of the building there, or the suite, and it appears that patrons will exit through that same door. And I'll defer to the applicant to talk to any other, speak to any other operational issues there. The sales floor is not visible from the exterior, and that is something that is required. We don't want folks to be able to see from the outside onto the sales floor. As far as other operational issues, the applicant has indicated to staff through an email subsequent to the submittal of the application that he will not be operating with curbside service, meaning there won't be dedicated parking spaces for delivery of product from the building to patrons waiting in their vehicles. So that is not part of the application, and should that be desired at a future date, they would need to come back for an amendment to the use. Relative to parking, it's a fairly small facility and does not require much parking. It only needs 4 parking spaces, and that's the same as the previous use in that suite. So parking is adequate. The applicant did indicate in the application and on this, on the plan somewhere, that additional parking would be available. I'm assuming that additional parking is on the parcel to the north. That's where they will be sharing a dumpster. However, the specifics of this parking arrangement has not been provided. And although we do allow off-site parking, I think it would probably be useful to discuss that a bit because cannabis uses do tend to have a lot of in and out traffic. The plan has been reviewed by the police department for compliance with crime prevention through environmental design principles. And it has been approved. It is absolutely sufficient. One element that we do ask of the applicant is lighting. We do have an interior lighting plan, but an exterior plan has not been provided, and so we would ask for that as a condition of approval if you are amenable to approving this use today. A good neighbor plan is required as part of cannabis uses. The applicant did reach out to the Midtown Neighborhood Association, which submitted a letter of support. The applicant also reached out to the Michigan Street Corridor Improvement Authority and also held the requisite neighborhood meeting last Friday, July 5th, and has provided us with documentation of that meeting. We have received one letter of opposition from an owner of a neighboring residential property. So in sum, we're looking at the establishment of a new recreational marijuana retailer in a retail suite of about 1,200 square feet in the TN-TBA zone district. Do you have any questions for me before I turn it over to the applicant?
Commissioners? Thank you.
Okay. Whoever's going to, so feel free to advance your slides, or I have a controller as well.
Thank you very much. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Robert Puckett. I'm the owner of Crafted Leaf Cannabis. We currently own and operate a retail dispensary in Middleville, Michigan. I am not new to Grand Rapids or Michigan Street. I also own Checkers Restaurant on the corner of Michigan and Fuller. I've been doing that for the last 25 years. So Michigan Street is definitely somewhere I wanted to come back to for a second location for our company and brand. I'm available for any questions. Mrs. Zeller answered quite a few. I did want to note on, as far as the parking, we have established an agreement with the owner of the rear parking lot that you see in the slide here. So through the owner of the business, Jeff Lobdell, we will then provide him, we have a contract, we'll provide him monthly payment for service to the rear parking. So our goal is really to have a majority of our customers utilize that parking lot, freeing up most of the spaces there for the Grand Coney as to not congest that corner or intersection. So.
Questions? We had the tinted windows. Are you expecting to change that up or leave them?
If that's a condition that needs to be done, we're more than willing to do that.
Okay. I did drive by there and saw that Coney Islands are tinted, but they're a little more transparent, so
Sure.
wondered if that was consistent without any other thoughts from commissioners about windows. Nope. And one other question I have. There was a rear view, I think, rear view slide that showed a garage door and a door. Is that yours, or is that?
That is a completely separate space to the space. That's actually a storage for Jeff Lobdell and his restaurant company, so they do store back there. We won't have any access to that.
So the only entrance is at the front?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, you can see that the southern half of this building.
Yeah.
Or quadrant, I guess.
Yeah,
The southwest
that's what I
quadrant
thought,
is for
yeah.
the proposed retailer.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from commissioners? Well, then we'll have you take a seat and we'll
Thank you.
open it up for a public hearing.
Appreciate it.
Anyone wish to speak to the project at 801 Michigan? Seeing none, I close the public comment hearing and ask commissioners their thoughts and discussion.
I probably should have asked this before, but I just thought of it. The parking lot behind the building, you had mentioned that you have an agreement to be able to use that. Are there markings at all letting people know to go there, or is that just an expectation of the
Yes.
public?
No, there are markings. In fact, as you enter that parking lot, there's a large sign that states that parking is only for the Grand Coney, what would then be added myself.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's large signs there directing traffic for that.
For there, okay.
Yes.
And do you mean on the property to the parking lot to the north as well, directing people to that parking lot? Commissioner?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was wondering if you were asking if there was going to be signage on the parking lot to the north that perhaps has a shared parking agreement?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question too. I would assume that there is some there.
Yes, it's on the entrance on Eastern, so it directs traffic right into that parking lot. So that's what we really want to heavily utilize.
Okay.
Have you considered adding any lighting to the front?
Not at this time, no. We really didn't want to make too many changes. It's suitable for our use. So yeah, at this time we didn't look to add anything.
Okay. Thoughts from commissioners about this request?
Sorry, I have another question. This one is for
How about two?
this one is for Elizabeth Doe. You had mentioned in your presentation that the requirement is for the floor to not be seen, the sales floor.
Right. The zoning ordinance does not allow the sales floor to be seen from the public, by the public.
So the lack of transparency for the building would be okay in this situation?
No, you still need to meet the transparency requirements. You still need to meet the transparency requirements. You need to design your facility so that the sales floor cannot be seen from the exterior. And you see they have a wall on the inside, so that prohibits visibility into the sales floor. We still do want we want the building to show activity, and we want to be able to see inside of the facility when it is open,
Just not on the floor?
just not on the sales floor.
Yeah,
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. It's the product that can't be visible from the outside. And so that's why the interior layout has to be such that the sales floor is internal to the site or in a location of the building where there are not windows. So we really encourage the floor plan like what's designed, where we have some sort of waiting area in the front, because the building still has to have a percentage of the facade to be transparent. I think the nuance here is that the current glass does not meet our requirements. Planning Commission has the ability to allow for those windows to remain as is if you feel like it's not materially impairing the use or the intent of clear glass, or you could require that glass be removed and replaced with glass that doesn't have the tinting. But they still have to have the visibility into the waiting area in this case.
Gotcha. That makes sense. For the applicant, is there, the graph implies that there's controlled access both in and out? So is there a certain number of people that you allow on the floor at any one time?
Typically, we are a one-to-one, so one employee hosting one guest. So theoretically, if you had five, employees, you could allow 5 people in. And that's pretty much our max typically, especially on this size unit.
Okay. And do you expect people to just pop up, or is it just by appointment? Is it pick up?
Oh, no, it's first come, first serve.
Okay.
You get checked in at a receptionist, so everything will be category logged on an iPad, so we'll know who came first, and then a bud tender will assist.
Okay. Perfect.
Any other questions or discussion? Yep.
So I have a couple of thoughts. I'm all for transparency and clear glazing, but I feel like the commission recently, with interior renovations only, has pretty much ignored transparency requirements. So I have a little bit of a hard time making them replace the glazing in this specific project, because I personally don't, I can't justify the difference, I guess, where sometimes we feel like projects don't need to, but this is strictly an interior renovation, so I don't know that replacing the existing glass is necessary. The parking thing, whether they have a lease agreement for the other lot, we were already told that there's sufficient parking on this site, so how they decide to handle parking for their facility to work with their neighbors, I don't know that needs to be of our concern. They meet all the requirements. So I'm in support.
Any others?
I have no issues with the use here. I guess I'd just push back a little bit. I think that the applicant said that they'd be comfortable removing the tinting from the glass, so I think that we should probably condition that, thinking of some of the more welcoming or better designed dispensaries around town, especially like on Leonard Street, high profile. On Alpine, you've got jars that very, open and airy lobbies, so you can see in and out. Feels better from the street. I feel like it looks more active, whereas with the tinting, you don't really know what you're walking into. You don't get that visibility between. And with an active retail use like this, I think it's really beneficial to have that, whereas something that's more maybe office-oriented or something where you're not seeing that activity doesn't really make a difference. I think you'd see the difference here. So I'd be inclined to condition that. But otherwise, very comfortable with this, and I can make a motion whenever we're ready.
Okay. Go ahead.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves the special land use and site plan review request of Leaf and Paper LLC DBA Crafted Leaf Cannabis, Robert Puckett, for a recreational marijuana retailer at 801 Michigan Street Northeast for the following reasons. The proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the mixed-use neighborhood service designation for this area in the Michigan Street corridor plan supports a range of commercial uses, including retail. The use will support the vitality of the local economy by encouraging investment, diversifying the economic base, and expanding employment opportunities. Number two, the proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of sections 5.12.08.e because the surrounding roadways and access points are anticipated to be adequate to accommodate the trips generated by the proposed development. The changes proposed are interior to the building and no site changes are proposed. Number three, the proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the existing or planned character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and natural environment because the proposed land use will retain the character of the area. GRPD has approved a SEPTED plan for the proposed use that is designed to mitigate potential crime impacts. The applicant has completed a good neighbor plan, including neighborhood engagement. The proposed use will minimize potential adverse effects on the neighborhood because of the orientation of the building toward Michigan Street and because of the provision of adequate parking. The applicant proposes a number of parking spaces that meets or exceeds the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, or visual clutter. Because excessive amounts of noise, glare, or visual clutter are not typically associated with marijuana retail sales, a good neighbor plan is required to be submitted and honored. The applicant is required to submit and implement an odor mitigation plan. The proposed use will not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment because the property is accessible from public sidewalks and the building entrance is oriented to the street. Existing windows, per condition of this motion, will be updated to remove tinting, and other transparency will be retained. Adequate public or private infrastructure and services do already exist or will be provided at no additional cost because the proposed use seeks to reuse an existing developed property which uses existing public services. An increased police and fire presence associated with the proposed use is not generally required more than other retail commercial land uses. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability or economic welfare of the city because the proposed use is expected to generate a number of jobs and potential tax revenues. Excessive use of police resources are not anticipated to be generated by the proposed establishment relative to noise, calls for service, trespass enforcement, parking, vehicular use by patrons, or vandalism. The proposed use will comply with all other applicable city ordinances and policies and all applicable state laws because the marijuana industry is closely regulated and subject to local and state agency regulations. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard conditions set A, approvals, and B, marijuana operations. Number one, that the application and plan submitted by the applicant and signed, dated, and stamped by the planning director shall constitute the approved plans except if plan elements do not meet ordinance requirements and/or as amended in this resolution. Number two, that the use shall operate according to the application and per testimony as recorded in the Planning Commission minutes. Number three, that this approval does not include any proposed signs and any future signs shall be subject to the requirements of Article 15 of the ordinance and permits received prior to installation. Number four, that a land use development services LUDS permit, building permit, and all other required permits be obtained from the City of Grand Rapids prior to the construction, demolition, or operation. Number five, that any expansion of the approved special land use requires an additional special land use review and approval by the Planning Commission. Number six, that the proposed use will comply with all other applicable city ordinances, policies, and all state laws. Number seven, that this approval shall take effect 16 calendar days after the date of the Planning Commission's decision. B, marijuana operations, that this approval is for only the requested marijuana facility types and does not include any approval for any other current or future facility types as permitted by local or state statutes or ordinances. Number two, that all commitments made by the applicant in the Good Neighbor Plan, Operations and Management Plan, public hearing testimony, and MyVita or a, I don't know what that is, community improvement, okay.
SICEVA.
I'm not familiar with that one, seems
It's
new.
the social equity plan for the recreational.
Got it. If applicable, shall be honored in good faith by the applicant and/or future operators of this land use. Number three, that the operation of this land use be subject to the approved SUPTED plan and any related local and state ordinances with any changes to that plan subject to the review and approval by the Grand Rapids Police Department. Number four, that all use regulations of section 5.9.19 specific to marijuana facilities be met, including product visibility restrictions and hours of operation limited per the application and testimony. Number five, that the facility plan as submitted to LARA be submitted to the planning director prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, and that any changes to the security plan as submitted to LARA shall also be submitted to the planning director. Number six, that evidence of a valid and effective general liability insurance policy meeting the requirements of section 5.9.19.f.4 be submitted to the planning director for review and approval prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Number seven, that a license from the state of Michigan shall be required prior to operation, and that a City of Grand Rapids license shall also be required for this facility, and this approval does not include approval of either license. Two, that this approval does not include curbside service. Should curbside service be desired, a special land use amendment is required. Number three, that an exterior lighting plan be provided at LUDS permitting. Number four, that the exterior windows on the Michigan-facing facade be updated to remove tinting.
Is there support?
Support?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Our next case is for 118 East Fulton.
The next item on our agenda is 118 East Fulton Street. This is a request to permanently establish an outdoor seating area with alcohol service and occasional live entertainment at the rear of an existing restaurant. Mexo Restaurant has been operating at this site since about 2016. I think they were established. And the location is on the south side of Fulton Street between Sheldon and LaGrave Avenues. Anytime there's a request for an outdoor seating with alcohol within 300 feet of a residential use, it comes before the Planning Commission as a special land use. The zone district of, this isn't the downtown area, TN City Center. It's identified in the master plan as downtown, in which entertainment, restaurant, businesses are encouraged and appropriate. The restaurant sits within a 4,000 square foot single-story masonry building with a storefront. As I said, it was established in 2016 with alcohol service. During COVID in 2021, there were special orders given, allowances given to restaurants to continue operations outdoors. At that time, an outdoor seating area was established with temporary approval. So the request before you today is to formalize permanent approval of this seating area. Surrounding uses are office to the east and south. To the north is surface parking area for Park Church, and the residential uses are to the southwest and west on Fulton Street as well. And there is residential use within 300 feet. The structure that was installed to establish the outdoor seating area during COVID is a 24-foot by 26-foot steel-framed fabric tent structure that abuts the south side of the building. At that time, it was not to be secured or anchored. It was secured by sandbags. The request today, the applicant has identified that they will be securing the structure to the existing pavement. The south side of the structure has a 6-foot privacy fence. The east side of the structure, as you can see in this image, has a blank wall without transparency. We don't have a good image of it, but I believe, and the applicant who is here can confirm, I believe on the other side of this white wall on the east side has a mural painted on it. One consideration for the Planning Commission today is to consider the transparency around this structure and its appropriateness at the location at the rear of the building. The west side is open. It's an open air, full transparency. It would appear that in the wintertime, there are measures taken to protect the seating area from the elements. So there aren't any changes to what is there proposed today. The existing structure will remain in place and used as it has been used since its temporary approval in 2021. Because it's intended to become a permanent structure on the site, it does need to meet building code requirements as a permanent structure, and this includes elements relating to snow load and wind impacts on the structure. Other considerations are the increase in occupancy. There are 40 seats within the structure, and that is an increase of the occupant load of the building. So that has to be taken into consideration to ensure that the facilities within the building can accommodate that increase in occupant load. And it also may impact the egress path out of the building. So a building permit will be required as if this is approved today. The hours of the operation of the outdoor seating area will be the same as the restaurant. Currently, the restaurant is open until 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturdays, 9 p.m. Tuesday through Thursday, and until 3 p.m. on Sunday. The additional consideration for occasional live entertainment, the Planning Commission may wish to explore with the applicant what occasional means, how many days a week it's expected. The applicant did indicate in the application that the music would be acoustic, non-amplified, and limited to 1 or 2 performers at a time. In sum, we are asking you to consider the permanent addition of this outdoor seating area with alcohol service and live entertainment at this location. Do you have any questions for me?
We showed the one picture with the stockade fence that, yes, this is, which is the current condition and what's the proposed? I'm not sure, because the previous one you had is the current?
Well, I think this is the winter, and the applicant can confirm.
Okay.
And then this is how it operates during the warmer months of the year. And
Okay.
in both images, the stockade fence is still in place. If you look closely behind the transparent material, the fence is still there.
I see, thank you.
Any other questions? Can you explain, that was one of my questions, thank you for clarifying that 40 seats outside is larger or more than what the interior seating is. What is that interior seating?
I will have to look at the original approval. I don't have that in my staff report. What? 261 seats inside.
Oh, the interior, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And did we, was there any public engagement?
I will let the applicant explain any measures they took to engage with the community. There were no letters received,
Okay.
no correspondence.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, thank you very much. We will call up the developer.
Hi, my name is Kathy Bono, and I'm the general manager of Mexo.
Good.
We've had that patio since COVID, and at the time, we didn't realize it was a temporary approval. So we did not reach out to the neighborhood because we just realized when we got the letter that we needed zoning approval for it. So it's something we can do. Since it's been open, we haven't had any complaints, no police calls, except for a homeless person, but no complaints whatsoever of noise. We rarely have music out there. It's usually if we have a rehearsal dinner or a wedding where the guest wants to include that, or like a friend playing or something like that. So we don't have anything scheduled on a or permanent basis for music. So, and we are closed by 10 a.m., so it shouldn't be a problem with the music.
Any questions, commissioners? And so you had this, 4 years now?
Yes. And just so you know, that gate, it doesn't show it very well, that fence, it does have a gate to get out. And it's been approved by the fire department for, it doesn't have, you can just open it to go out,
Okay.
so.
And do people gain access right from
They,
the alley or from your
They
restaurant?
usually leave through that, they come through the restaurant, and the host sits them back there. But they can leave through there. And then the one side's open, and we have like a garden. We have, Chef Askar has all his plants out there.
Okay.
So they can get over that way if they wanted to climb over the plants, but the fence does open.
Okay. If we don't have any questions, I'll ask you to take a seat, and we'll open the public hearing. Anybody who has comments about this project can come forward. Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing, and I'll ask my fellow commissioners to weigh in on their thoughts.
I would say I don't mind this use. I feel like if it's been there for 4 years without incident, seems like no-brainer to me. I think as a patron of restaurants, I do appreciate sitting outdoors and the weather is nice, so having that option is nice. For transparency, I don't know if, I guess I would ask if there are requirements for a facility like this. I don't particularly mind this the way it is, but if there are any additional requirements that we're not meeting, interested in knowing.
Or I don't know, you can correct me, but there's not any, there are requirements under the canopy where we recently, it might have been recent, 18, 19, where we updated our canopy enclosure requirements to allow for kind of that 3-season, 4-season use of outdoor seating. And there was a lot of conversation about it wouldn't be glazing, but it would be transparent plasticized side walls that would act as windows, albeit I think the majority of that discussion was when those canopies were taking place in front of the building. I think in this situation, being in the back of the building, being a zero lot line building, I'm not sure that there's any specific requirement I can think of that would require you to have glazing. Just a general overall aesthetic of having the solid.
So I'm comfortable with this as proposed then.
Any other thoughts, comments? If not, can I get a motion to consider?
I can do that.
Do we have any other comments for the record about the appropriateness of the use?
I'm very comfortable with this. As Commissioner Yonker said, this has been operating for several years without incident. I think it's a nice amenity. We're downtown, so I think even having the occasional live entertainment is a good fit. I have no concerns.
Yeah, I was going to speak to that part too, the live entertainment. Even in the case that there is, I think it's still okay being where they are. And, you're going down there for a lively, entertaining time. So I'm okay with this.
Okay.
All right. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves the special land use and site plan review request of 118 Fulton Operating LLC DBA Mexo Restaurant, Peter Krupp, to permanently establish outdoor seating in association with an existing restaurant at 118 East Fulton Street for the following reasons. The proposed uses will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the proposed use will provide an amenity for restaurant patrons that is common in business districts. It will support the vitality of the local economy and encouraging investment, diversifying the economic base, and expanding employment opportunities. The proposed use will meet the site plan review standards because the proposed patio improvements will not impede the normal and orderly development or improvement of surrounding property uses. The proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the character and uses of the neighborhood and adjacent properties because the use will support the purpose and intent of the TNCC zone district by providing interesting and fun places to eat and socialize with a mixture of ages, social peers, coworkers, and families. Potentially adverse effects arising from the proposed use will be minimized by the location of the patio, which is situated to not interfere with nearby residential properties. The proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, smoke, or odors because no public testimony in opposition has been provided. Outdoor entertainment will not be a regular occurrence and will be limited to a solo or duo acoustic set. Late night hours of operation are not proposed, and it has been in operation for over 2 years without any complaints. The proposed use will not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment because there are no changes to the site that will affect the pedestrian orientation. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability or economic welfare of the city because the use is not anticipated to result in nuisances that require code enforcement actions. Given the character, location, development trends, and other aspects of the neighborhood, it is demonstrated that the proposed location for alcohol sales is an asset to the neighborhood because the restaurant already provides alcohol service and the patio is an extension of this established use. Outdoor seating is a desired amenity that contributes to the vitality of the downtown neighborhood. The use or change in use as constructed and operated by the applicant is compatible with the neighborhood because the scale and hours of operation are inherently limited and limit the intensity and impact of the use. The use as proposed to be operated by the applicant will not have any or minimal negative secondary effects on the neighborhood because the use is not anticipated to result in nuisances that require code enforcement actions. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard conditions set A approvals on the screen. I don't believe I need to read this since it was on the last case. That concludes my motion.
Second? Do I have a second?
I think we missed number 2 on their standard conditions.
Did we?
Just the sealed plan being submitted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Number 2, that the sealed plans shall be submitted with an application for a building permit to ensure that the structure will meet building code requirements for permanent use. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign for no. Motion carries. Next item is 638 East Fulton.
The applicants are requesting approval to allow construction of an 8-unit development consisting of 4 two-family structures of 3 stories in height. This is before you today because multiple family residential and height of 3 stories is subject to special land use approval in the TNLDR zone district. As you can see, the subject property is in the TNLDR and is surrounded by TNLDR zoning. This location is not in Heritage Hill. I want to let you know, it's outside of Heritage Hill. It's historic in that it is an older neighborhood, but is not historically designated. You all might be familiar with this site as a city park, Baldwin Park, at the intersection of Fulton and Lake. Visually, it looks like the park is this entire green space, but actually, the park is just a small area at the corner. The site that we're talking about today is about 17,000 square feet, and it's a through lot with frontage on both Fulton and Lake. There was a house on it. This is the 1912 Sanborn map. The subject property is in the upper left, and it's interesting to me that all these houses were already there as well. Unless this was mislabeled, but this we did find this online as the 1912 Sanborn. And this is the house that was on the site. We weren't able to find the year that the house was demolished, but we have heard that it's been gone for over 30 years. So the site has been vacant for a long, long time. On the site, there are some stairs still to the house, and I think there's a drive approach. And it looks like folks on the neighboring site have used this property for parking. But essentially, it's unimproved. There is a grade change of approximately 7 feet sloping up from Fulton to Lake. The site, as you can see, has lots of trees on it. A lot of the trees they're not the highest quality trees. There's a real mix. We have some really high quality trees in that there are some large oaks on the property. There are also box elders and mulberries. So there's a range of trees on the site. So the applicant is proposing an 8-unit development. It will consist of 4 separate buildings. each containing 2 units. And each unit will have an attached 2-stall garage. 2 buildings will be oriented toward Fulton, and 2 buildings will be oriented to Lake. So the slide that we're looking at right now, these are the Fulton-facing structures. And the slide that we're looking at now are the Lake Drive-facing structures. As you can see, we have, particularly on that Lake Drive, we have a full 3 stories facing the street. I'll go back to that. So we have 3 stories facing the street on Lake, and that is one of the reasons that this is before you as a special land use. I do want to mention that all the structures are within the 35 feet height limit for the zone district. And this is showing the Lake Drive elevations. You can see that the second story is raised above the grade somewhat, and that is to help accommodate the garages. The slide being shown now shows the trees that will be removed to facilitate the construction, and we do hope that the trees that are not shown as being demolished will be able to be protected. There's quite a large tree. This is a 48-inch oak. We really hope that can stay. There is also it says box elder here, but it's actually a mulberry. It's on the city property, but the city won't mind if it's removed during construction. It's actually, it's leaning, and it's not a high quality tree. So that will likely need to be removed to facilitate construction. And we did check that with the city forester. So we have 4 buildings, A, B, C, and D. And altogether, we'll have 8 dwelling units, and the 8 dwelling units are well within what is allowed on this property. It is within the it is within the requirements for the TN LDR zone district. So the 8 units are within the permitted density here. What I want to talk about now is the required building line, and the applicant did a really nice job of showing the setbacks of all the homes in the vicinity. And we come out with established RBLs on Fulton and Lake of approximately the same distance. I do want to note that the RBL required building line is at the house and not the porch. The porch can extend in front of the RBL, and the RBL is where the building needs to be sited. We determine that based on the established setbacks of property in the vicinity. On East Fulton, the established RBL is 27.7. The proposed setback of the westerly building is 19 feet, and I'm going to have to go into some detail on this building A in a few minutes, but we'll call it 19 feet, and the east building 21.3 feet. So in sum, the proposed building setbacks are closer than the established setback on Fulton Street. It does appear that they are approximately where the porches are on Fulton Street, but not the buildings. We have a similar situation on Lake. We have a established setback of 27.3 and a proposed setback of on the west building of 24.3 and the east building also 24.3. So again, a couple feet closer than what the established setback is. The Planning Commission does have some latitude there, so I would encourage you to consider the appropriateness of what is being presented here today. What I wanted to mention about this Building A has to do with its design. And if you're looking at this slide, you can see these kind of columns sticking out here. And let's see, I'm going to have to go to different plans there. So on the ground floor, we have two parts of the building that are actually closets from the inside that are, I believe, I can't remember now if they're 3 or 4 feet, if they're 3 or 4 feet wide. I probably have it right in here. And then, so that's, on the ground floor is where the established building line is. That's where we say the building needs to be set. This design has sort of an inset porch. Part of it's outside the building, part of it's inset. And then if you go up to the second floor, you'll see that there's an overhang. That second floor actually is in the same plane as those columns. So kind of the mass is really at that second floor. And I will go to an elevation to show you that. I think renderings will be better. Let's see, which one should I use here? I know, I'll go back here. The building in question is the one I'm pointing to here, V01, version 1. And you can see that there are some columns that stick out, and that second floor is above it, okay? So, and then this third floor is actually stepped back. And we did talk to the applicant about doing some of these step backs so as to not create to help soften that 3 floors at the street. So we do appreciate that they incorporated that step back at the 3rd floor. So what I'm asking you today is whether you find this design to be acceptable relative to establishing the building setback. I hope that is clear. I'm not, also, on this same building, we need to talk about the percentage of building that is located at the RBL. This zone district requires at least 60% of the building to be located at that RBL. All of the buildings meet that except for this one. Now, I think we could probably make an interpretation about the design of this building if we want to call it that second floor where we're establishing that RBL. So that would be one part. However, some slight modifications would need to be made to the building nonetheless, because even at the widest point of the building, it's only 52% would be at that RBL. The side setbacks are fine. So, and then the green site elements, I talked about the trees already. Green space will be adequate. And I don't know what the tree canopy is. I might have overlooked it, but it appears to be meeting the requirement, and that will be confirmed at LUD's permitting. Now, relative to height, the TNLDR allows 2.5 stories and 35 feet by right. Additional height or stories can be granted with special land use approval, and that's what's being requested today. So it's really on these Fulton, on the Fulton buildings where the 3 stories is being requested. Associated with that additional height is transitional features. So the Planning Commission should consider whether the design is adequate as proposed, or whether some additional transitional features should be applied to this design. Transitional features can include landscape buffers, building step backs, recess lines, or other techniques to help mitigate that additional height and mass, or architectural features. So that's another ask of the Planning Commission, whether any transitional features are needed here. The primary building materials for the buildings are brick and fiber cement siding, and those are high-quality materials meeting our building requirements. Relative to transparency, I will go on to this slide here. At least 20% of the area of the front facade shall consist of windows or primary entrance doors, which permit a view from the dwelling to the street. Again, with the exception of Building A, the buildings will meet that transparency. Building A has 16% transparency. So Building A, I'm pointing to it at the on the slide. There's one other element of transparency that I'd like to mention. You know, these buildings have a significant amount of transparency on them, lots of windows, except for the interior facing walls of buildings C and D. They face each other. They're what I'm pointing to on the slide right now, and I believe they're 5 feet apart. So to meet building code, they can't have windows. They could be further apart, and windows could be added. So that is something that I'd ask the Planning Commission to consider here, whether the elimination of windows there is appropriate. Let's see, I'm not sure which one I should go to. Here, I'll go. Okay, so relative to building orientation and entrances, you can see all the units identified on this slide. And maybe there's a better one. Yeah, this one's a little bit better. So each of in building B, C, and D, each unit has access, direct access to the street at the front of the building. The exception is Unit 2 in Building A. It does not have access to lake. It includes a stoop and a long sidewalk, to Lake Drive. So the Planning Commission may wish to consider whether this orientation is appropriate. Finally, parking. Each unit contains 2 parking spaces, meeting the parking requirement. The applicant has conducted neighborhood outreach with the East Hills Neighborhood Association and the Midtown Neighborhood Association. We did receive a letter from East Hills, which is in your packet. And outreach was also conducted with the adjacent neighbor. There are some, I'd like to defer to the applicant to talk a little bit more about the floor plan and the design and why they made some of the design choices they did. I know that this has been a challenging site for a couple of reasons. I mentioned that there are sloping grades and it's also a through lot. So it has been vacant for a long time, and there's probably reasons for that. It is rather challenging. So I'm sure they'll be able to explain why they made some of the design choices that they did, and some why they made some design choices that they did. So in sum, the Planning Commission should review this multiple family project of 3 stories relative to the proposed density of 8 dwelling units, the site layout and setbacks, and with that, I'm really talking about the RBL that I mentioned, the building type and massing and design, as well as the orientation, particularly with the entrance on Building A, Unit 2, the pattern of development relative to neighboring properties, as well as transitions to and from adjacent uses. Do you have any questions for me before I turn it over to the applicant?
Commissioners, any questions at this point?
Yeah, I have one. I'm sorry, I was looking for it again. There was something in your staff report related to, was it transparency or the 52% along the RBL that we are not allowed to deviate from?
Yeah, so at least 60% of the building needs to be at the RBL, okay? On this Building A, if you want to assume that the RBL is being, the setback is being set at the second floor where that mass is, plus these columns, that's, if you want to go with that, we still have a little problem because only 52% of the building is at the RBL. It needs to be 60%. So that 60% can't be modified. I would suggest if the Planning Commission finds this to be appropriate, modifications could be made at the time of building permit.
Thank you.
Other questions of Elizabeth? Well, we'll call up the developer and thank you very much, Elizabeth, and let them fill us in on more information about this project.
You can advance slides here and here, and you can point with this, and I can also advance while you're talking.
Thanks. Good afternoon, I guess. Brent Gibson, Construction Simplified, owner of the land and president of Construction Simplified, your neighborhood construction developer, infill specialist maybe. Elizabeth did great. This was a very challenging site. We first contacted Tyler Kent back December of last year before we even acquired the property to make sure we understood maybe how the commission or planning department would view this. And since then, I think we probably met with Kristen, Elizabeth, Tyler, Lauren, 3 or 4 times working through these details. So I'm not going to reiterate everything. I wrote some notes down, just maybe either confirm or agree to some acknowledgement there. First, the history. It's been vacant. We purchased it off another builder in town that didn't bring it to fruition. Knowing that this is a really, at least to myself and my partner Austin at the firm and in the property, knowing it's a very high profile location, we wanted to do it right. Because of that, we wanted to do market rate housing, knowing that for us, it felt better in that corner of the community. As a staple, as you enter a very, Elizabeth hit on it, it's not Heritage Hill, it feels like it. It's not, when we went to Midtown, they said, why are you guys here talking to us? It's not ours, even though it feels like ours, and East Hills. So really just wanted to make sure it fit. But understanding the slope, not only from Fulton down to Lake, but also east to west. I think one of the renderings, I don't know if I'm doing it.
I need to fix this here. Can I jump right in?
She changes that. One rendering that she showed.
Which one do you?
Yep, this will be fine. Just building B here appears to be 2.5 floors, if you will, from street. Yet as you go 40 feet to the west, you have a full 3 stories. So it also slopes pretty drastically west to east. As you know, you're starting to head down the hill into the city at the top here. So a lot of challenges to fit everything. But that's why we had Justin Longstreth with Moore & Brugink help us try to fit this. The average unit size is 1,750 square feet of living space. We felt it was very important to have 2-car garages if these were going to be market rate. You had to be able to offer that amenity to park in your garage. That would be guest parking would be on the street on both Lake and Fulton. High quality location. We also felt it was very important to have 3 exterior walls, so we did not have a center unit if these are going to be market rate townhomes. So that's why we chose the route of 4 duplexes. So at least you have this pride of home ownership, and you can say I own 3 walls and I only have neighbors on one of them. But that all drives the sizing. You need a larger unit to sell. You need 2-car parking. You need cars to be able to maneuver within that space off-site. We needed the right size of space so they could be appropriate market rate, because that's what the community also validated, that they really want that home ownership in these areas. The 35-foot on the design side, understanding it's an opportunity for the Planning Commission here to approve. We are, I say, well under, a couple feet under that at the mean height of each roof. Our designs are somewhat more modern, lower sloped than the adjacent neighbors, being more traditional and higher sloped, but our average is actually less than those. So we felt good there. The trees, I thought it was interesting, Elizabeth mentioned the city forester. That was one of our very first calls, trying to actually get their participation with us to review the trees, to understand if there was anything special. They looked dead to us, but we're not foresters. So I'm glad to hear the confirming comments. I think what Elizabeth said, the northwest tree definitely needs to go out. It's on the property line. The southwest most likely will stay, and we want that sense of community in that corner. I think achieving green space, achieving the tree canopy, all that was challenging, but it balanced the 8 units and the size and the parking that we have. And then the RBL, certainly I'm not going to get into the detail there. To Elizabeth's comment, if ultimately the 52%, I believe that's a new challenge for us as of this meeting, but I think quickly we could solve that by extending that closet deeper to, trying to find the floor plan here. Here we go. So what we could shorten this planter up, extend this wall to hit that 60% very easily. The reason that this planter is here is to the 5-foot minimum to offset a garage from the RBL. So there's a lot of things that work and how we got there. I think Elizabeth said it. That's an easy solution that we can easily put in here or during building permit to achieve that. Any other roadblocks? The windows transparency. I didn't understand if that was a hard and fast, we have to change that on Unit A, or if that's something the commission can approve. But certainly if we need to add more windows, we would support that, or more size, square footage of windows on Building A. I would just summarize, if there's any detailed questions, either myself, Austin knows all the details of the plans, and Justin on the civil side, but we've spent a lot of time to make this work. We feel it's the right product, the right design to fit into the neighborhood, high quality, in a market, in a housing world that all type of products needed. So for what that's worth. Any questions of me?
Commissioners, any questions?
Could you please explain your choice to put these buildings closer to the street than anything else in the neighborhood?
Yeah, a lot of it, to get the parking on site, to have the size units we need, to also, correct me if I'm wrong, Austin or Justin, but the Lake Drive units are within acceptable RBL calculations. It is these two, A and B, on Fulton. That's the challenge. Do we have photos of the porches to the next? The adjacent houses have pretty substantial porches. So we're working with Elizabeth and team, understood that the size of these porches adjacent, there's a lot of variety in this neighborhood. Trying to get it to work from massing, which is why she touched on the fact that level 3 was stepped back. We did a lot to step back level 3 or the second floor to add some depth, to add the covered porches, to try to bring it more into the variety. If we didn't do that, Brian, then we would lose units and probably make this development not feasible from a for sale product. It would probably go multifamily, rent, and that's not what we felt was appropriate here.
Other questions? I have one on Building A, and I don't know if I'm seeing this right or not, but the front entrance is on Fulton Street, if I understand right. But there seems to be a lot of brick or solid. Yeah, so it's a small, like almost tunnel going into it.
Building A here.
Entry. That's the entry, right?
That's correct.
So is there a front porch here, or am I seeing a total brick wall there? I'm trying to...
If you go to the rendering, it'll show it better here.
It just feels like it could use more transparency. Or if it is set back.
I don't see that we have a good rendering of that, Austin, do we?
While they're looking for the image, there is, if you look at your floor plan for that building, there is a half recessed porch into the ground floor, the at-grade floor.
Which has then a full brick wall behind it.
It does have a brick wall, and when you look at the floor plan, you can see that most of the wall is adjacent a closet.
Going back.
And so adding a window would only be a window into this closet as it's currently designed.
It just feels like a very, yeah, I see it now, from that angle, that there's like area for seating there. And maybe it's because there's a brick wall and then another brick wall. It doesn't feel real open and welcoming to me, but.
Agreed, this was by far the most challenging unit because in our view, it has two front doors. We wanted to also really face the park and traffic. But we also took inspiration from what's in the neighborhood, and there's a lot of different, some are very big grand porches and some are tucked around the corner and a small porch. So we wanted variety in the development because they are for sale units. We wanted somebody to feel like they had their unit versus someone else's. That was the result. If I could show you where we started, you'd say, oh, I love this one. It was very challenging, and I would like to say that we worked well with the department to arrive at this solution. Could we keep designing? Yes. I think our ask would be, How so? Because we're fighting the garage element, we're fighting the 52 or 60% here, we're fighting the elevation. There's a lot of things that work specifically on this corner. And because it's a triangular site, you have to have the garages facing east.
Okay.
Or we'd have another drive off of Lake, and you'd lose units. So it's just, it's
Well,
tough.
from this angle, I can see that there's some depth behind it and not a total wall, as I first interpreted it. So that's an improvement. Commissioners, other questions or thoughts or?
So with respect to the transparency, I mean, I guess generally probably not willing to give up on transparency, so you can have a very awkward closet. So, I mean, is there an opportunity to ditch the closet and put glazing in the garage that's similar to the other window that's in the garage?
If you
To
give me
mitigate
approval,
some of
we
that
will.
concern?
So this is where our ordinance, the objective standards make it difficult to work with unique site constraints. Because of the need of trying to have more livable area fronting on Fulton necessitated them to pull back the garage so that it was at least 5 feet behind the massing of the front face of the building. But then we were also working to extend that usable, livable front area. Now, if the Planning Commission wants to define the RBL at the second floor, what would effectively be the second floor here, and forego allow for that to lead the building massing at the RBL, then perhaps there is more flexibility to allow for that closet area to go back to the garage the way Brent had it originally designed, and then require windows into the garage. That could be a compromise, I think, that could work as well. It's just one of those.
This is a window into the garage.
Which we'd prefer that.
Yeah, truthfully, that was how Brent had initially come forward with it, and we pushed back because we were trying to get as much livable area at the street frontage versus a flex room, and the more than almost at least 50%, if not a little bit more, was dedicated to garage. But if the Planning Commission feels comfortable looking at that second floor as what's going to establish the building frontage, then we could look at walking back that closet area. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I feel like there's two different ways to look at this. I feel like there's, like if we're looking for more living space at the street, then there's a building orientation issue, and a closet that doesn't really function that's not giving more livable area at the street.
Fair.
In my mind. So, yeah, I don't know if that closet's actually helping. I understand the rationale behind it, but I do agree with the concern about the amount of livable space on the street. But I have similar concerns with the flex rooms along Lake Drive. Those are not, I don't know the exact dimensions, and they may very well meet building code minimum dimensions for living space, but they are probably not going to be very functional spaces. So even though it technically meets the requirement, maybe the way that they're going to function, I would have a similar concern. So I guess I don't see much of a difference between accepting the flex room here and the one on Lake Drive. I understand that there's a width difference, but.
Yeah.
Is the flex room a part of the 1,700-something square feet?
Yes, and we called it flex because we're not dictating what it may be, whether it's a home office, whether it's an entryway. To Brian's point, a smaller one might be used as entry, whether they use it as actual living room space down there.
Can they use it as a bedroom?
I would assume so. I'm not an architect. I assume so. Probably meets.
You have to have a certain amount of,
Yeah.
I'm not either, but windows.
That's why we chose the word flex, so it was
Yeah.
understandable that you could just call it a room space.
Would another opportunity be to not call that a closet, just part of the entryway of some sorts, little nook, chair or
Yeah,
whatever,
certainly
and
we
put in
looked
a window there.
Initially, that was part of the garage area, so you'd have storage within the garage.
Okay.
Because of the garage requirement at the no greater than 40%, it makes a good usable closet. So whether you have storage in the garage or storage off the flex room, we feel that's important as a homeowner to have that space. So whether the door goes on either side.
Other thoughts, comments, questions?
If I can address the
Yeah.
transparency too, we spent a lot of time, and Elizabeth can attest, we shrunk the window sizing to fit better with the scaling and the massing of the neighborhood to get it appropriate. So I would assume to get 16% higher, it's not hard to increase a window by 6 inches and probably still not drastically affect the scaling of those units. So if that's necessity, we can do that.
You can do that, okay. Well, we'll ask you to take a seat,
Thank you.
seeing there's no other questions at this time, and open up the public hearing for comments, thoughts. Anybody here to speak? If you are, you can come up to the podium here and state your name.
Yeah, hi, my name is John Haynes. I live a block away from the project, and I know the city needs housing. And I think in general, I'm supportive of this project. I had just a couple of questions, and I think my main reason for being here is to really better understand kind of how these projects are communicated to the citizens and then approved and rolled out. You may have answered one of the questions already. So in the narrative that I read about the project, in a section on neighborhood outreach, I think you talked about Easttown and Midtown being supportive neighborhood associations. And I didn't see like a letter of support from either one, but you mentioned you got one from Easttown, and I didn't see names connected.
Sir, if you can address the remarks to us, and then we'll give the developer time to respond.
Okay, I'm assuming the question's going to go that way, but.
It will. Hopefully he listens.
Sorry. So I wondered if there were support letters from those neighborhood associations. I read too that some of their input was incorporated into the design of the project, so I didn't know what that input was. Do they want to save oak trees on the lot? Do they want to make sure there's parking for all these cars, that kind of thing? I know that's some areas of concern with people in my neighborhood. The second area that I had questions just goes right into the trees, I think. There was in the application review a section just called environment, and I think the contractor, the guys behind me here, wrote that landscaping shall meet the zoning ordinance for the zoning district, and existing trees will be protected wherever possible. So I walk the neighborhood a lot. There are a lot of big oak trees in the neighborhood, and I'm maybe here just speaking for a few oak trees. I wondered if you knew what trees are coming down and what ones you're going to save. There is that big one, I think, in between, like on the southwest side, is you mentioned. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So those were my areas I had questions about and concerns about.
Thank you. We'll ask the developer to respond. Next. Thank you.
Hello again. I'm Andrew Carley. I'm the Director of Outreach for Strong Towns Grand Rapids. Strong Towns Grand Rapids generally supports housing in Grand Rapids. We are supportive of this project. We appreciate the housing being close to the streets. That really helps really bring the street environment closer in, helping slowing down drivers, provide safer neighborhoods, and really allowing neighbors to connect. Having porches and patios on housing, especially in neighborhoods such as these, is really important for community connection, and we really appreciate the additions in there. This lot has been empty to the best of my research abilities, about 58 years, almost to the day. It was demolished on July 19th, 1966. based on what I could find at historicgrandrapids.org. Whether that is factual or not, I'm not sure. That's just where I found it. So it'll be really good to see something starting to be developed in this difficult property. And add housing stock. 8 units can house, on average in this area, we'll do about 20 people or so. Of course, we'd like to see young families and stuff like that moving into these apartments as well as bouncing those numbers up. But this project could, based on the average of who lives in Grand Rapids and per head household or per household head, 20 people is better than the 0 it's currently doing. So we like it.
Thank you for your comments. Next?
How's it going? I'm John. I live right across the street on Lake Drive, so most of my comments will be regarding the Lake Drive side. Can't speak for Fulton. But I'd like to start just saying if you start a proposal with 2 technicalities in my business that's kind of setting you up for failure with proposals. Sure, it's not technically in Heritage Hills, but like the developer said, no one on Lake Drive thinks, oh, I'm not in Heritage Hills anymore. So, and then regarding the park, while the park is technically just that triangle towards the fork, no one views that as not part of the park. So just would like to clarify that. And I appreciate the developers speaking to kind of the history of the neighborhood and those type of things. I feel like it falls a little flat when you look at the renderings, and that's probably best case scenario. I heard a lot of the word need throughout. That property definitely doesn't need 8 units. I think that's a little excessive. I think if it was even half that, I doubt this would even need to come to city council. So I feel like that should probably be considered at some point, but due to the nature of the questions by the council, they were kind of on the micro level, not really the macro level. I'm probably talking to a wall, so that's a bit unfortunate, but I'd just like you to consider that along with other things that people mentioned with trees and street parking. On the Lake Drive side, there's no less than 2 or 3 cars daily every hour on Lake Park, so that would pose a bit of a problem. Again, can't speak to Fulton, but thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, one more thing. If you could ask them how many letters they got asking about the nature of the development, I would appreciate that too.
Okay.
And just taking into account, if you're getting inquiries about it, it's probably because they don't support it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask the developer if you would like to respond to some of the questions brought up.
Regarding Mr. Haynes, is it? We're all for protecting the trees. I think we should have in our package what trees we believe will be saved and protected. But also, we have obviously new landscaping plans that will comply with city ordinance to do so. Maybe it was in our own stuff that has it. That's fine. Our own stuff that was highlighted.
So this slide shows the
This
trees
shows
that
what's
are
being
coming out.
removed. Correct. To Elizabeth's early point, this tree here is suspect, sus as my kid would say, and I would question if that's even viable to live. And it's right on the property line and next to the house, so that's probably going to have to go. But this we want to keep because it's obviously in that courtyard space that's there, and the rest will be replaced with new trees that meet the ordinance. So. That's important to us as well. Was there any question specifically that?
Well, neighborhood support letters?
Yeah, so he was addressing East Town. I may have misspoke. It was East Hills, which is a neighborhood association we met with.
Okay.
They did provide a letter of support. And quite honestly, the first time we went to their meeting, they supported the very first variation of it on the pure basis of we need housing, we love for sale product in this area. We did try Heritage Hill multiple times. Heritage Hill Association could never get an email back, a call back. I even sat in 2 of their meeting times. Nobody ever showed up. So I don't know if that's a vacated group right now or not. We've tried to email everything. And then what's the other one?
Midtown?
Midtown. They were the ones that said, I'm glad you guys are here, but we have no jurisdiction because it's outside of our
Wow.
association. And they had great snacks over by Fulton Market. So, and we also did talked with Ryan Kilpatrick from Housing Next. We were supposed to have a letter. I have a text clearly showing his support. I was supposed to have a letter from their department and office supporting this project as well from Outreach. I would say, I don't remember the lady's name that lived across the street.
The email's in the packet.
Oh, we included the email in the packet of she was wanting to save the flowers over there. Absolutely, they've been maintaining them since. We said, we'll give you a heads up before we start. I feel we've done, other than knocking on doors within 300 feet, we have not done that. But I feel like we've done everything we can to engage the associations, whether they're directly or indirectly part of this.
Trying to remember if there were any other questions.
I think there-
Commissioners?
Sorry.
I just wanted clarification on what you just said last. You said you did or you did not knock on the doors within 300 feet?
We did not.
You did not, okay.
And to, I forget the gentleman's name, we would have provided everything, good or bad, or addressed it. And I would say we have not received any negative letters at all to date, so.
Yeah, and in often cases, the planning department, not, in all cases for special land use, planning department does send out postcard letters to all occupants and property owners within 300 feet of the subject development. Owners, tenants are encouraged to correspond directly to the planning department, and any correspondence received is then automatically uploaded to the planning commission's packet. So you have all the letters that were received by the planning department, which is the preferred route of communication for your public hearing.
And I guess I would say is, that's why we didn't knock on doors, because I knew that was the process. Austin reminded me, parking, we felt it was important so we don't impact the neighborhood more. We have 2 spots per condo, so that it's fully self-parked off-site. Maximizing the availability for street parking that's there to be utilized by whomever's using it today. Will continue to tomorrow, so.
Any other questions of the developer?
I don't have a question of the developer, but there was a comment during the public hearing or a question about general communication of projects, and maybe Laura Elizabeth, after, I'm not sure was the next case, could touch base and address that, because I think it was more general, but definitely a question we should be answering.
Commissioners, any other questions before we go into discussion here? Okay, then I will close the public hearing and we will go into discussion. Thoughts about this project?
I'm generally in support of this. Just what is it, Building A? As one of the other commissioners had mentioned during the questioning, we definitely want livable space here. And so that's probably would be my focus. But it is nice to see something. I walk through here all the time. It's a nice area. I am very, very guilty of thinking that all of this was the park, and I have definitely trespassed numerous times, so apologize. But it's nice to see something going here. I was also worried about the parking, right? There's always cars parked there, and it's near that light. And nobody knows what to do, it seems like, anytime a car is parked there, especially during the wintertime, so it's always messy. But I am glad that they have parking spaces within the development to be able to stay off the street there. And yeah, those are my comments.
Other commissioners?
So I'm also generally in support. I think the density is fine. I think the height's fine. When you look at the houses in the neighborhood, they're large homes. and I don't think that there's going to be an appreciable difference in scale between the existing homes and these buildings. I don't have any parking concerns. So, and I haven't decided how I feel about it yet, but generally the required building line, in my experience, when you're looking for excuses or reasons to adjust that, the established building line, it's actually so that you can align with the rest of the buildings on the block, because sometimes taking into account properties across the street messes up the number. So this is a little bit fussy for me, because in my mind, the intention for that is to have a consistent building line down the street, so that you don't have some buildings that are way closer to the sidewalk and some that are much further back. It's intended to have like a nice consistent building line down the street. And so this is certainly a departure from that. The distance is measured not to open porches. I've been through this lot. So it's measured to the enclosed front of the residence. So I don't know if it's a significant detriment, and to be honest, I think if it was more of a multifamily product, there might be more of an excuse to be closer to the sidewalk. I think the tendency for those it's a building type issue, but when these are residences, things get a little fussier. So I guess that's really my only hesitation, is whether or not the departure from the required building line and being closer to the street than the other houses in the neighborhood is appropriate. So I like other people's thoughts, but everything else, I don't think we need any transitional elements to transition from a 3-story down to a 2.5. I don't think that you'd be able to perceive the difference, so.
Thank you. Others?
Yeah, I would echo those comments, generally in favor of the development, in favor of the density there. Yeah, that building A is a little awkward, right? I kind of thought about this before, maybe I'll ask Kristen, was there an iteration, was it tried to rotate the building so that the garage faced Lake Drive instead that might make it more awkward, I don't know, but that's what's creating this issue with building A, is that building really faces the intersection, not either street. I don't know if it was, it appears approximately square. If it was rotated simply in a driveway, it might be too awkward, and there might be too much grade change there, and you might end up losing that 40-inch oak, which I think is more important to me than, a 6% or 8% on the RBL line at this point.
Yeah, I think there was an early addition where the garages faced south or faced lake. That necessitates, my recollection is that would necessitate an access point from lake. There was also the question of, we've got 2 street frontages and a public park. And so by orienting the garages closer to the park was also not necessarily a desirable view.
Right.
So we really, I think, beat building A up pretty good.
Yeah.
Looking at all of the different values of the city, the needs and wants of the developer and the architectural style they were going for. Ultimately, I think that there was general consensus that this felt like it respected the street frontages and the park the best, but not without some concessions.
Yep, and I can see that, and I think I maybe followed about some of the conversation around the RBL and garage and the weird closet situation, I guess, absent a complete understanding of, what the ordinance says and what we're allowed to deviate upon or not. I would say my preference would be to see more transparency along that street, even if it is into a garage. That doesn't bother me so much that, I don't know that as a pedestrian you walk by, you see that window's into a garage or into a living room. So I guess I understand what we're trying to do there. I don't know that I feel real strongly one way or another about it. But I would like to see that transparency increased enough to just get to that mark. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me.
Anything?
Yeah, I think I agree with what the other commissioners have said. I'm very comfortable with the density. Parking is provided and adequate. I think architecturally it fits quite nicely. With some new modern takes, but I think it's nice and high quality. So I'm in favor of this. I think if the facade was even all the way across with the garage and there wasn't that bump out there creating the column to support the second floor, then I think transparency into the garage might be more of a concern for me, because it is more obvious that it's a single large room storing vehicles, where I think that the jog in the wall with additional transparency will work there. So I'm comfortable counting the second floor as the line and allowing the window there on the first floor to go into the garage and not into a closet. Yep, I'm pretty comfortable with this.
Thank you. I agree too. I used to live a block or so from this site, and thought it was an unkept park. Never lodged my complaints with the city, but now I see why I didn't have to. But it is good to see infill housing that respects, I think, this neighborhood, but also provides some of the modern amenities that people are looking for in housing. I too would like to see a window, whether it's into a closet or a garage or whatever, to break up that solid brick on Building A. But otherwise, I support this project and am welcoming the addition of more housing to the city that really makes sense of looking at and taking the time, and thank you for that, to fit some of our odd kind of opportunities land-wise to add housing to the city. And I hope more will do that. With that, do I have somebody willing to make a motion?
One more comment I'll make, just because it's in the conditions, and I think it's worth talking about, the transparency requirement between building C and D where they're 5 feet apart. I don't have a problem with that. I understand the reason for separating those buildings. Personally, my preference would be C, to just put them together so that we have more actual green space, because that 5 feet will never get, nothing's going to grow in there. It's just kind of a waste space. I understand the marketing reasons behind it, but I'm okay with it with the way it is. It's not maybe my preference, but I understand it, and I think it's acceptable given the distances between those buildings.
Thank you.
I'm willing to make a motion.
Thank you.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves the special land use and site plan review request of Parkview Trio LLC, Austin Kettlewell, to construct an 8-unit development consisting of 4 two-family structures of 3 stories in height at 638 East Fulton Street for the following reasons. The proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and ordinance, including the zone district, because the proposed use will meet the underlying intent of the MCN LDR mid-20th century neighborhood low-density residential zone district to create, maintain, and promote a variety of housing opportunities for individual households, support the goals outlined in the master plan Great Neighborhoods chapter that are supportive of the provision of housing types other than single-family detached residential, including GN3, provide a broad range of high-quality housing choices, GN3A, maintain and increase the number and variety of housing units, GN3B, allow for new housing products, GN3C, allow for a range of housing types within all neighborhoods. The proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of section 5.12.08.e because the residential use is at an appropriate density for the size and nature of the site. Elements of the site design are harmoniously and effectively organized in relation to the size and character of the site and the type, size, and proportions of buildings. Natural features, including mature vegetation and site topography, will be incorporated into the site design to the maximum extent practicable. The proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the natural environment because the site plan addresses the existing built environment by appropriate location of building types and orientation relative to adjacent properties. The project maintains the neighborhood's unique character, enhancing its walkable scale and reinforces its sense of place. The proposed development will result in an appropriate density for the neighborhood. Potentially adverse effects arising from the proposed development on the neighborhood and adjacent properties will be minimized through attractive architecture and appropriate building orientation and entrances and adequate parking. The proposed development will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, or visual clutter because adequate setbacks will be provided to abutting residential uses. The proposed use would not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment because the proposed development will reestablish the street wall on all street frontages. The development will be located in close proximity to public transit. The health, safety, and general welfare of the public will be maintained because the site was previously improved and will require a limited amount of new infrastructure which will be provided by the developer. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city because the additional units will contribute to the tax base. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard conditions set A approvals, as seen on the screen. Number 2, that the buildings may be located at the proposed front setbacks. Number 3, that 3 stories in height may be permitted as proposed. Number 4, that building A shall meet the front transparency requirement of 20%. And then a question on the second part of this, 60% of the building facade be located in the required RBL. Is that true?
Still want that, yep.
Okay. So number 4, I'll read again, that building A shall meet the front transparency requirement of 20% and the requirement that at least 60% of the building facade be located at the required building line. Number 5, that the transparency requirement is waived for the west side of building C and the east side of building D. Number 6, except for the mulberry tree on the west lot line, which may be removed, that off-site trees and any on-site trees shown to be retained shall be protected consistent with the requirements of section 5.11.10. Number 7, that the site shall meet all green site element requirements, including but not limited to green space, tree canopy, street trees, and landscape buffers.
Do we have support?
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Sorry, just a
I'm
quick correction. In the first line, you referenced MCN LDR, which was our mistake. It's traditional neighborhood, low density. Sorry about that. It's a correction of the motion.
Can we discuss another piece too, please?
Sure.
The 20% transparency for building A. I know Brent offered to make the windows on the upper floors wider to meet the requirement. I'm not sure if that's the best choice.
Do we want
I
to?
think the discussion about window proportion and certainly the concerns about the buildings in the neighborhood, or like the neighborhood in general, like taller, skinnier windows like are proposed, are much more common in the neighborhood, and by making them 6 inches wider, I don't know that you're, and I don't even know if this is something we get to do, but I don't know if you're making an appreciable difference as far as eyes on the street or connection to the street or daylight, but you will potentially change
The character.
the character.
I'm comfortable with that. This is where we're suggesting adding a window on the first floor. I assume that will already increase the percentage of transparency, so.
Depends on the size of the window. If you just take one of the 21 square foot windows that they had upstairs and just move it down, you end up at 17 and a half. So there's.
I'm comfortable with that. In fact, if I'm comfortable with them working with city staff, as you said, I don't want to impact how it works with the existing character, so I'm not set on the 20% requirement, and I'm comfortable leaving it as what's proposed or greater, and leave it up to them to work out what's best. But I would not, to your point, I wouldn't suggest that they need to increase the width of the upper windows.
Did we want to be specific about them adding a window on Building A on the first level.
Yeah, I think as long
Is
as
that
we're allowed to do
included?
that part with the livable space on
We'll
the
figure
street
that out.
frontage. But work with staff to
Okay.
provide additional transparency on the first floor.
So are we clear?
Maybe the first sentence of 4 be updated to read that that additional transparency be added to the ground floor of Building A,
Yep.
and that the requirement of at least 60%, et cetera.
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
And who seconded?
Mr. Young?
I did, yeah, still support, yep.
Okay.
So the intent being that additional transparency added to the ground floor, but that the window size openings on the second floor are appropriate to the architectural style, and the preference would be that they remain as proposed,
Yep.
is how we'd administer that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Good luck. 1 minute break. 1 minute break, but we're going to set up for the next item is 355 or 335? 3530 Eastern Avenue. Outdoor storage. We'll wait 1 minute. Eastern Avenue Southeast.
I'm going to
Thank
do
you.
my best to keep this presentation short. There are details in the staff report, so if I don't mention something and you have a question, please ask at the end. This request is for 3530 Eastern Avenue Southeast. The applicant is requesting to increase the amount of outdoor storage on the property, and it is going to be in the front yard. So there is already outdoor storage on the property, but this is an increase of what's existing. The property is it's industrial zoned. To the north is Memorial Park. To the east and south are industrial uses, and to the west is the city of Wyoming. As you can see, this is a large property. It is almost 10 acres.
Wow.
In area. The proposed area of work is closer to what you see on this slide. A 1.43 acre storage yard is proposed. On this slide, you can see there is a connector street from 36th Street to Eastern Avenue. That has been removed. That connector street no longer exists. The city has removed it, and grass and trees have been planted in its place. So while the storage area is proposed in the front yard between the buildings and the street, there is a significant amount of space and trees available to screen the storage area that I will get into. This slide shows the area of work and where the proposed outdoor storage area will be. The property is owned by AT&T or Michigan Bell Telephone Company. They've owned it for a long time, and they need this area to store cables and equipment. And the vehicles will come into the site, access the storage yard from inside the site, load their trucks with the equipment needed, and then go on with their work. So as I mentioned, the storage is proposed in the front yard, and I'll go through the zoning ordinance requirements for outdoor storage and screening. Storage may be permitted in the front yard if it's shown that there's no substantial detriment to surrounding properties, and there's adequate screening and a minimum setback of 15 feet. This storage area is set back more than 30 feet from the property line. There are existing trees that provide screening, and additional trees are proposed to be planted. The Planning Commission will consider these plans and the proposed screening to determine if it's adequate for the proposed area for the storage yard. All outdoor storage areas are to be completely screened. Landscape berms are also incorporated in the plans. All equipment stored should be at least 25 feet from the property line and at least 75 feet from any residential zone districts. This location meets both those requirements, and no hazardous materials are proposed. Regarding green space and tree canopy, although a significant amount of lawn and green space is to be removed and then replaced with crushed gravel as a surface, the site as a whole, the area of work, will have a total green space of 35% and a tree canopy of 20%. The property overall will have a green space of 24% and tree canopy of 17%, meeting the 15% requirement for both green space and tree canopy. There is an existing storage area to the east, at the easternmost part of the property. That is used today and will continue to be used in addition to this storage area at the west side of the property. Does the Planning Commission have any questions for me?
Doesn't appear so. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to hearing from the owner, operator.
Good afternoon. My name is John Hood. I'm with EXP U.S. Services. We're the architect engineer for AT&T. We do all our work in the state of Michigan, basically. This project was being driven by, they had another location. This operation was actually on Alpine Avenue in Comstock Park. The building was hit by a tornado last year. I guess we had a tornado in Grand Rapids, technically, high winds. The building was destroyed, no, the roof was ripped off half the building. So AT&T leased that space. They've opted to relocate into one of their own facilities, and that's what this project entails. So we've kind of moved their operation to this layout and try to preserve their parking area that they have. There is, as you can see, there's 2 other buildings. They do have different groups that work in those buildings, administrative use, and there is also a garage in that area too. So whatever they need to do for maintenance and such will just happen in that garage that's already being functioning as a garage. So really nothing else is changing other than they're taking the space to put their storage of cable yard equipment. It's outside plant, they refer to it as, the people that come and run fiber, and basically they store all that for those folks. We've also used a drainable crushed gravel as part of the placement of everything, so our civil engineer trying to meet all the requirements for drainage. We think we've addressed that. Some increase in retention as well on the site. It's all on the drawings. We think we're trying to satisfy all of this to make this work. Also some more, like Laura said, more landscaping, a buffer, and some berms. So with that, do you have any questions for us? This is Melanie Hagel. She's with AT&T, and my project architect, Don Duggar. So.
Any questions, commissioners?
Can you, I'm certain it's in the print, so forgive me, but can you describe the fencing that is proposed along that, kind of that diagonal line there? What's that intended to be like?
That is the fencing, is that?
Fencing is already existing.
There's already fencing there. I don't think there's new fencing, but I think it was installed like last year.
Okay.
There's a 6-foot chain link fence that is, you can see this, the perimeter of the storage area shows the fencing. That fencing was installed about a year ago, or within the last year, and that went through staff review and it was approved. So the fencing is already there, 6-foot black chain link fence.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do you use all 360 some odd parking spaces that you currently have?
I believe so. A lot of times, a lot of the folks that come to this site will change vehicles, leave other vehicles in place, and go back and forth with some of that. And then there's the garage function that works on vehicles, and sometimes they're used. So I've been there several times, and most of the lot is pretty much full. Is that correct? They use most of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends time of day, in and out.
Yeah, evenings and such.
Company vehicles are typically parked within the garage. You don't see those.
Can you come up to the?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, so we don't use all of those parking spaces. Like John said, typically we have company vehicles on the lot. The employees come, they park their personal vehicle, they take their company vehicle, load it up, go do their work, come back, swap it back and forth. There's an increase in the need for parking because the tornado did make our other building unoccupiable. So we've increased the amount of vehicles here just based on having to move business functions to the site. But our parking lot is not full. If you look at the spots on here, we're never typically filled up the entire parking lot.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? Do you operate 24/7? Or do you have 3 shifts?
This
Or
proposed area the cable yard would operate 24/7, and that they would be just moving things around, more or less, the cable racks and coils and such. So that would be 24/7. I don't know, the main buildings, I don't think there's administrative function groups there. And
Right.
this is not a telephone switch facility. This doesn't operate phones or anything like that. It's more support. There's record-keeping divisions of AT&T that work out of this complex, other groups too. So they're pretty much like the 9-to-5 type operation. That doesn't occur in the evenings usually. So the power group that she mentioned before was in that other storage area. They are 24/7. They support all the power, including emergency power. They're kind of isolated from all the other functions, and because you can see it's secured, it's separated by a fence. They're their own group, and they use that space. So that's basically, you've got a little bit of both going on. So
I lost Xfinity for 2 whole days in the last storm. I want to make sure all of you are on call.
Can you tell me how many employees do you have that work at that facility?
I would say between the 3 buildings, 30 or less, who work there, for the entire day, who are not coming in and out.
Okay, so for this complex, if you will, 30 or less employees are there. And how many, you said that there's individuals that come and pick up their vehicles and swap their personal vehicle with their city vehicle. How many employees do that at the location?
Quite a bit. I mean, the lot's pretty full every time I've been there.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not sure.
We'd have to do some research.
Yeah, I'd have to do some research, but I could get that information, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. So anecdotally, you're suggesting that the lot is 70, 80% occupied at any given day?
Yeah.
That's probably accurate.
That photo is, I think that's an older Google photo, or, I don't know, every time I've been there, it's been pretty full.
Okay, well, I think, quite frankly, that for me, the challenge is that every photo I have is showing a similar situation.
Okay.
And so without having more concrete data to show what that parking demand or utilization is, it certainly appears like there is a lot of parking that is available that, in my opinion, could be potentially explored for outdoor storage instead of where you're locating. But that's something for the Planning Commission to decide. So I heard that there is a chain link fence, and it looks like there's a berm. What's the height of the berm? Ballpark?
I believe it was like around 3 feet.
3 or 4 feet.
Can we have you speak into one of you speak into the,
He believes he's the project architect. He believes it was 3 or 4 feet.
Okay, and is that on the outside or the street side of the existing fence?
That would have been on is it by the landscaped area? Yeah, so that'd be the street side.
Okay, and does that construction of the berm necessitate any existing tree removal, or
I don't believe so, no.
no? Will new trees be planted on top of the berm?
I'd have to double check, again, Don, if you can answer those questions.
I do not believe so.
Do you have a plan?
You don't believe so?
I think to piggyback on those questions, there indicates a detail of that berm shown on C3001, but that's not in our packet.
I guess I'm really curious, in the interest of everybody's time, I don't think there's parking calculations in this packet. I didn't see it. I saw that there's the number of spaces on site, but not calculations for the project or the building or the use. But there seems to be questions about how the parking lot is used. I mean, are we going to get anywhere without knowing that information?
is parking a requirement under this plan?
Well, I think that question was perhaps discussed, both the parking utilization and prior conversations with the applicant. For us, the outdoor storage isn't generating an additional demand for parking. It's taking place in the green space. So if the Planning Commission reasonably would connect those and you would like us to require that information, we can certainly do that. But one didn't have to take place without the other unless it was a question by the Planning Commission to be able to push that line of thinking.
I guess with the limited information, I'm very curious about parking lot utilization and the opportunity to repurpose some of the existing pavement for these storage needs versus take out the entire yard in front of the building and get a special land use for it. So, I mean, that's a specific question for me, but I don't know that. So I guess I was just curious if other planning commissioners had the same similar concern.
I do, yeah. I think taking up much of the front yard space, even in this area where it's, fairly industrial in use. Neighbors include a railway, a roadway, and a cemetery. I still would want to understand the parking, as it does feel like there's a very large pavement section area, and yet, so yeah, I think the question for me becomes how much of that pavement area could be repurposed for outdoor storage instead of taking up all the green space.
So what I hear you saying is that it's not the amount of parking, whether they, because it doesn't seem they use all the parking, that this, which is a very large footprint, it could be put where the parking is instead of on the right-of-way or the front of the property. Is that what I hear?
I think that's the question that I have, yes, is does the entire green space have to be taken up? Could we increase that setback, still provide some of the storage and provide some of it in the parking?
Do we have
underutilized parking?
Do we have a slide that shows the existing green space versus? Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. The green area there, instead moving it over to the parking lot. Although, do other commissioners have a concern about the location of the outdoor storage? I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I do think they have a lot of parking, which allows them room for growth, but as long as we have a berm and what I understand the purple will be the new landscaping.
Yes.
Commissioners?
I mean, I would prefer to have more details on how much parking is used. I think, it's in the city's interest to try to limit the amount of concrete, asphalt we're putting into the city. But I just need the case to be made that they need this amount of space and that they can't find it elsewhere. So I guess I'm kind of on the same page with the first two commissioners that spoke.
Can I address that?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Some of the parking shown on here is taken up by existing trailers, sheds, storage units. We have portable generators, emergency generators that are parked in numerous spots. We had to also take into consideration the through traffic when vehicles come in. Some are large trucks coming in, loading, unloading, and the traffic flow getting those trucks in and out. And regarding the size of the yard, we took what we had up in Comstock Park, and this yard is actually smaller than what we had there, but that is the driver behind the space. And if we took that square footage that we're turning into the yard, we actually would not have space in the parking area to create a yard that large, maintain the portable generators, the storage, the sheds, and vehicle parking, and traffic flow through that space. I don't have the square footage off the top of my head, what the size of that yard is, but, you can see once you take that space, if you tried to place it elsewhere on the site, it really doesn't work well.
I can understand that. It does look like a lot of asphalt, as you said, and now we're going to add more. Could they use the existing asphalt? But I can also see the layout and configuration, that what they've picked is the best. I think, too, when we see the additional landscaping that takes up that, what was that road space, that further isolates the storage area that's outside. So I'm not as concerned about it. This is pretty isolated kind of space as it is. Others, I can ask for a motion and we can see where it goes, or is there more discussion?
I guess I'm just looking for clarity here. I'm sorry, we've been talking a while. I'm confused. The space that's shown on the screen that's in purple, we're saying that that's going to be landscaping, right?
Yes.
And the space that's not shown, where there are existing spaces, we're saying that's going to be their outdoor storage space. So there's no building going up there. They're storing there.
Yes, it's also, that's not asphalt, it's going to be crushed gravel that's porous, that can drain also.
Okay.
Drainable gravel.
Okay. And then the question from our side is basically, why can't you use the existing parking lot to do that?
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or at
That's
least,
what I understand.
at least in part, right? I guess the other, another thing that I'm seeing is I don't see the detailed berm plan. I don't see any additional landscaping being proposed. We weren't able to answer the question about how high the berm was or whether the landscaping goes on top of the berm. There's no screening being proposed essentially from 36th Street visually over the new detention area. Perhaps those could be conditioned.
It could be conditions, or we could table it and ask them to bring back more specifics.
Do we not have the landscape plan?
Does somebody want to make a,
There was dialogue with the Lutz permit and the landscaping revisions, right?
can you speak into the microphone?
Sorry, there was dialogue back and forth. This plan that you see was actually revised in our dialogue during the Lutz plan review. So that berm, we're not, is this a current plan?
Right.
Okay.
So, sorry about that. So we have the existing fence. The berm would be outside of it. There's additional trees that would be planted along eastern side, and also additional trees along the fence line on 36th Street.
So those trees shown in the cloud there are new trees?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
The ones that
Okay,
are right
okay, I apologize.
north of the
Yeah.
retention area.
And what are the okay, forgive me. I wasn't reading that plan correctly.
Just want to remind the Planning Commission that we have one additional case and we have 9 minutes remaining in the meeting. So
what would you like to do? Would you like to put a motion out there and see where it goes? Would you like to table this? I think we have to, that's the choices we have right now. But I need a motion by somebody either way, and then we can vote on it, and if required, we can have a second vote. Is that okay? I need a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to table it. I feel like there's a lot of questions about the berm and the fence and the trees, and I feel like we're struggling to try to just get this through, but at the same time, I don't know it's our job to try to prove this. So I think it's appropriate to request more information about like whether it's a section through the berm with the trees and it shows the fence and it shows the relationship of all these site elements and how they relate to the zoning ordinance. And then on top of that, I guess if it's not required, we can't say that we need parking calcs for the project, but
Well, I think under
improving
special
some
land use
need.
standards, to determine if it's appropriate to put it in the front yard, it would be helpful to know what is the utilization of other areas of the site.
Yeah, so a site plan that shows existing utilization and
I don't know if an elevation would be an appropriate request here, but being able to kind of get an idea of what this berm and any new landscaping might mean from the street, I think would be helpful as well. But I'll support the motion to table. I apologize.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion to table, and hope to see you back soon. I hope you got, and I'm sure staff has good information that we can give you back. Oh,
At this point, we're going to have to table it open with the agenda load that we currently have.
oh, I didn't hold a. Yep. Okay, we're going on to our last agenda item, which is presented by Laura, 1516 Caesar Chavez Avenue, which is currently torn up.
Yeah. Avery's going to take this case for us.
Avery, I'm
today.
sorry, I forgot that.
That's okay.
No worries.
Thank you, Avery.
Of course. The next item on the agenda is a request for 1516 Cesar Chavez Avenue Southwest, and the request is regarding a parking waiver. The applicant intends to construct 2 additional stories above the existing single-story building to develop 17 new dwelling units. 1 first-floor storefront space will remain. The property has no on-site parking spaces. Therefore, the applicant is requesting a waiver for all required parking spaces. A special land use may be approved to reduce the required parking above 50%. Other than this requested parking waiver, the project may be developed by right, and the Planning Commission's review will be limited to the parking waiver request. This site is located in the TNTBA zone district with mixed-use commercial located to the north, east, and west, along with low-density residential to the south. This site is also located in the Roosevelt Curve in the Granville Avenue Area-Specific Plan, which was adopted in 2017. With this area-specific plan, they've outlined a number of recommendations that address housing. For example, creating additional residential housing types, such as apartments above retail, has been recommended. The site is approximately 7,000 square feet in area and has been improved with a single-story, 4,000 square foot building with 3 storefronts, one of which is a barber shop and the other 2 are vacant. The building occupies approximately 2/3 of the site, with the remainder being green space. And again, it's important to note that there is no on-site vehicle parking. For the project, 2 new stories are proposed above the existing single-story 4,000 square foot building, resulting in 3 stories of about 16,000 square feet of development. 1 restaurant space and 17 dwelling units are proposed. For the basement level, 2 one-bedroom units and 1 2-bedroom unit is proposed with tenant storage area that is going to be used for bicycle storage. On the ground level, 2 one-bedroom units, along with a proposed restaurant and even more bicycle storage for the micro units, as shown where the cursor is on the screen. On the 2nd and 3rd floor, there will be 2 studio micro units, along with 1 one-bedroom micro unit and 3 one-bedroom regular units. 6 of the dwelling units are considered micro units, which are units that contain no more than 475 square feet. It's important for me to define a micro unit because These units have the required parking can be reduced up to one half space per unit with the provision of 2 enclosed bike spaces per unit on the ground level of the building, which the applicant will be meeting this. In addition, so of the 6 micro units, they will need 12 bicycle parking on the ground level, again, which they will be meeting. 11 bicycle parking spaces for the traditional or regular style bedroom units, and 1 space of biking space for the restaurant. And there's also a bike rack that will be provided on the front of the property along Cesar Chavez. As far as vehicle parking, assuming retail use for the existing commercial space, 12 parking spaces will be required for the building as its current configuration, and 30 parking spaces is required for the proposed use of the lot. And therefore, a waiver of 18 parking spaces is required for the proposed use of the development. The zoning ordinance provides several methods to reduce or waive parking requirements. So it's important to note that there is on-street parking provided on or with completion of the Cesar Chavez Avenue Road construction project. And the image before you shows that according to the parking occupancy map of 2023, the on-street parking in this area in the front of the property is indicated to be 75 to 100% occupied, which just shows that it's well used for the area. There's also, this area is served by the Rapid Route number 3. So there's 1 northbound stop and 2 southbound stops. For neighborhood input, the applicant has been exploring parking agreements with neighboring property owners to discuss shared usage of nearby parking lots for tenants, and I will leave this to the applicant to discuss further. We've heard back from a nearby business owner and the Potter's House School, which can be seen on the map. We have received letters of concern just regarding parking in the area, as well as an email from Roosevelt Park Neighborhood Association also expressing concern. We've received 1 letter of support, and long story short, the Planning Commission should consider this request to reduce required parking through a parking waiver of 18 total parking spaces. Does the commission have any questions for me?
Commissioners? Questions? Thank you, Avery. We will ask the developer applicant to give us their information as well.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Juan Lopez. I am a new developer in the area. I have been a part of the Cesar Chavez, or I've always known it as Granville Avenue community for a while now. I am just excited about this project. It's a big step for me, and it's something that I look forward to taking on, and hopefully taking care of any challenges that may come my way to make this happen in our great community, to beautify it and make a better space for everyone in the area.
Any questions? Commissioners?
In the presentation, it says that you've been in communication with neighboring property owners about shared parking agreements. Have you made any movement on that?
Yes, absolutely. I would say we're pretty close to having some agreement in place with the ownership of the Mexican supermarket right down the road there. They have plenty of parking. Today I met with the Roosevelt Park Ministry as well, and they have a lot there right down from a little south that we are also in talks with to find an agreement where we can work together to ease parking. Same thing with the parking space right across the street. I'm very close to the owners of that lot, and we're just waiting to figure a few things out before we can reach an agreement for that as well.
Other questions? I have one. So typically, you would need a spot for loading and unloading if you didn't have parking directly, if people need to come in and out. Do you have anything specified for at least loading spaces?
We do have on-street parking there that I believe that there was a sign before the road got tore up that actually said loading zone or something along the lines where you can only park there for a certain amount of time, something like that. And that's typically what I would use when I would work on some renovations of the restaurant myself. I would park there. Give and take. Another thing that I'd like to add, mainly all the parking spaces in the area after business hours are conducted are relatively empty. So that's another reason why I think we'll come to an agreement with surrounding property owners for easement of parking.
Have you operated, or are you operating, or have you been operating the restaurant?
No, we stopped construction almost when we were finished, and I learned of an option to bring something even greater to the area, possibly. So that was the reason.
Other questions of commissioners?
Could you clarify the number of units? I heard 17.
17 units.
17 units, and they're all micro units?
No.
6 of them are micro units?
6 of them are micro units, correct.
So we're expecting how many people to live here?
We have 1 2-bedroom,
Yeah, we got
5 studios, and the balance are 1-bedrooms.
Yeah, so like Peter said here, we got a 2-bedroom, 4 or 5 studios, and the rest would be 1-bedroom units.
Okay.
So you're talking at least probably 20 people around that living there?
I would say, yeah.
Is the back part of the building, I see the outline here, it's not always correct, is that vacant, and are you building on that? That'll include housing? Am I correct in that it's vacant?
Yes, yes. So the back is vacant. We are possibly working with Reyes family there because we don't have access to the back as of right now. So we're looking at options on how we can, on what we can do with that space.
There's no alley, I see. Other questions?
So just to confirm, right now, we don't have anything in place for parking that would accommodate any parking spaces or give you any parking spaces in the area?
I'm currently working on that actively.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the proposed parking supply, as it's being proposed today, would be satisfied through the waivers, which would be the proximity to transit, bike parking, on-street parking, et cetera. There is no dedicated private parking. You're correct.
Okay.
If there are no further questions, we'll ask you to take a seat, and I'll open up the public hearing. If there's anybody here to speak on this project, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for thoughts from the commissioners about this project and the request for a waiver of parking?
So I feel like I've very consistently said that we need to support people more than we support cars. So in the interest of consistency, even though it's probably really frustrating for some neighbors.
Precedent doesn't matter. It's case by case.
It's fine. I'm
Thank you.
maybe I'm over explaining. I'm in support. I think that, I know it's busy over there, and I know that there's a lot of cars, but I think housing density is a good thing, and I think it's good for the neighborhood, and I think that it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just to piggyback on that, I just asked the questions that I asked because I just wanted to be clear about what we're saying and what the expectations are. Generally, I'm in support of this. I would think that, especially with these micro units and the bike spaces, things of that sort, even the folks living here, they're not going to have 2 or 3 cars. But even if they do have one, I think this general area, it's going to suck if you need to park there. But I don't expect all 20 people who may live in this building to need to park. So for that reason, and because it's so close to transit, it's on a busy line, it's a busy street anyway, and there's a lot of things within walking distance of this place. I'm generally in support of it.
Other comments? Discussion?
Yeah, I think I'm generally in support of the project. The parking issue in this neighborhood is a little bit more of a struggle for me, just because I understand, I know people who interact and live and work in this neighborhood. I also think this neighborhood is culturally different than many of the neighborhoods in our community, and many intergenerational households. Not a lot of financial resources. I look at that a little differently than in a downtown neighborhood and that type of thing, where, many of these homes have 3 generations in them, and every one of those generations needs to get to work and that type of thing. So it does, generally I would say I'm in support of this. I think I would consider a conversation around a condition around some of those parking agreements that he's working on. I don't know what that would look like. If we can condition that, I don't know how many spaces I would necessarily want. But I do think, I know that parking for the neighborhood association and for many of the businesses and the school, et cetera, in this neighborhood continues to be it is a challenge, and it's a challenge that affects everybody. And for some reason, I feel a little differently about, I'm generally people over cars all day long, but in this neighborhood, I feel like there's a little bit of an asterisk on that for me.
Anything?
Yeah, I'm 100% in support of housing, additional housing. But to my point to Commissioner Swim, this is a pretty unique property that we're considering, and it's in a unique part of this neighborhood. I think if it were 2 blocks north, northeast, I suppose, I might feel significantly different, but this is a very congested part of the neighborhood. I'd say the most congested part of this this stretch. And in general, I think people figure it out, but here I am concerned that in figuring it out, we're putting the burden on neighboring residents and businesses and organizations. So this is a tough one. I would have preferred that they had a parking agreement somewhere where they could direct their residents to park, even if they're not using their car on a daily basis. But I don't see where they could park at this point without negatively impacting the neighbors. The on-street parking, I don't think, considering its usage, that we can really use that with this waiver. So I'm struggling with it. I want to approve it. I just don't know that I can support it. I'm not the only vote, so I can't approve it on my own.
Likewise, I like the project a lot. I think mixing it up with micro and one-bedroom and a two-bedroom, walkable to different amenities in this area, a brand-new street, hopefully, that's going to really look nice. But if it were a waiver for part of them, but for all 17, and if you look at the parking lot across the street, that looks full. I don't know what time of day, but still. So my concerns are the marketability of the units without, designated loading or parking or anything that I can see. It's within that block. You go another block, and maybe the rents are such that people would, defer that need of parking close by. But I have some concerns about the investment here without the parking. Any other thoughts on this before I call for a motion? Yes.
No, I was just going to just piggyback just slightly up on that. I think this is one of the cases where the market itself will handle that. I have a car, so knowing that they don't have parking, this probably wouldn't be my first choice to move. So I think, if people who have a car and are looking for a place to live in this neighborhood, I think they would take that into account before they would sign a lease, and definitely take into account that Mail's towing sign down the street, if you park in somebody's lot overnight. I think the market will handle that itself, and then it'll just be that.
So I just wanted to circle back on the bylaws, the fact that 3 votes in the affirmative would be required to move this forward, to approve. I've heard, I think, 3 of you express some concern. And so I'm wondering, just because if you vote and it fails doesn't necessarily mean it's denied, but that might be something to consider, whether there's an opportunity to give this a little bit more time, to let the negotiations play out a little bit further with the parking arrangements might be something to consider. I guess I'm looking at the 2 of you, but I just wanted to be conscientious of 5 here today, the number of votes required, and the conversation that's just taken place.
I thought I heard 3 supporting, but.
I think I asked about a condition around the agreements that, the applicant has stated are close, even for, I mean, maybe I'll throw out 9 spaces. 7, I don't know what the number is. It would make me more comfortable. I think even without that, I think I would still support the project. I think, I don't think it's this project's fair to saddle this project with the parking challenges in this whole community, this whole neighborhood. So I think I would still support the project, but I would ask the commission to think about an opportunity to condition that on some type of arrangement for some exterior parking so that there is something at least available.
I would support it with that condition, with a condition for if they could submit a shared parking agreement.
For how many spaces?
I didn't say. That's for whoever makes the motion.
Well, it sounds like I would support that as well. I mean, this is a good project. We need more housing. This neighborhood is doing, we're seeing investment, and appreciate that. So there's so much to like about it that I don't want to trip it up over something that they need to figure out. with their clients. So
Okay, I'll make a motion.
that said, a motion, please.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves the request of Cell Building Company Peter Scornia for a waiver of the required parking for 17 new residential apartment units at 1516 Cesar E. Chavez Ave Southwest for the following reasons. The use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the project will support the purpose of the TNTBA to direct higher density housing to a location on or within walking distance of a major transit route. Support the recommendation of the master plan to help to eliminate redundant parking by encouraging the use of shared parking for uses that experience different peak parking demands. The Granville Ave area-specific plan recommends access to diverse and abundant housing choices. The use will meet the site plan review standards of section 5.12.0E8.E because the site will be developed so as not to impede the normal and orderly development or improvement of surrounding property for permitted uses. The development will be designed to meet all other requirements of the zoning ordinance. The use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the existing or planned character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the natural environment because pursuant to the Granville Area Specific Plan, residents desire their neighborhood and traditional business district to be an attractive and vibrant place. The project supports the Granville Area Specific Plan recommendation for residential infill, including housing options that satisfy the needs of the diverse range of neighborhood residents, including the missing middle housing typology of apartments above stores. The use will not have adverse effects on the neighborhood because the amount of parking requested for a waiver will be offset by nearby parking lots, on-street parking, the use of public transportation, bicycle parking, and through the submission of a shared parking agreement to satisfy some of the parking demand. The use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, or visual clutter because the intensity of the use is appropriate to its surroundings with access to multiple streets and public transit. The use will not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment because the proximity of the project to public transit will encourage mobility shifts that can reduce dependence on single occupancy vehicles and decrease traffic congestion. Public or private infrastructure and services already exist and are adequate to support the proposed development. The use will not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city because public available parking in the area already exists to support the increased need resulting from the proposed use. There are businesses in the vicinity within walking distance that the new residents are anticipated to patronize. The proposed use will comply with all the applicable city ordinances and policies and all applicable state laws. Be it further resolved, the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard condition set A approvals, as seen on the screen. And number two, that a shared parking agreement satisfying the need for 18 parking spaces will be submitted to the planning department there.
Support?
Doesn't seem unreasonable.
Support? Any support?
I'll support.
Okay.
How many spaces? 18. 18 spaces?
All those in favor say aye. We
No
had
one
support. You supported, yeah. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It looks like we're discussing it, though.
Yes, let's discuss it.
Are we allowed to discuss it?
Yes, we can discuss, yeah.
Yeah, we should discuss. So the motion or the condition is for 18 parking spaces.
Are we going to?
Are we amenable to 4? Yeah, I mean, at that point, we may as well have just,
I don't think 4 moves the needle.
okay. How about 10?
It starts to move the needle. I think that there are surface parking lots in the area that can handle this. But I think it's important to give people that live here an option. And so if they can find those spots, I think that satisfies the demand. Because I do think that more than 17 people will live here. I think that there will likely be more than, so, I'm not dictating how close by. I just want people to have the option.
Somewhere at a park. Okay.
Kristen, I have a dumb question. So
We allow one session.
So I feel like our options were table it until they get a parking agreement, right? Or do what we're doing right now.
Mhm.
Is there a path without it being ridiculous for them to come, like, let's say they get 12 spaces and they have a plan in place for them to come back if they can't get to 18 that we're using as a condition?
Well, sure. If they can't, if you say 18 today and they can get to 12, they can apply for an amendment and come back, and you would go through a similar process.
So it'd be similar to if we tabled it, it would just be slightly different? So, yeah, I guess that's how I'm making this make sense to me, is that we didn't table it and make them go do it right now. So we give them the chance to go home and do it, and just have it be done. And if there's only 10 or 12, then it'll be like we tabled it and they came back with proof anyways.
Reconsider it, yes. We can change that requirement, right?
I would also, well, I mean, it's your motion. I would potentially, I will withdraw my support for your motion and suggest a modification to half of the required spaces, 9.
Well, I would say that we're waiving 18 parking spaces, but we've already used a reduction of the requirement. Like we've used waivers to reduce the required amount of parking as is. So this isn't just to satisfy all of the required. It's the additional, like what's left over. Right? Because otherwise it would need more, right? We've already reduced through the use of waivers.
No, didn't we reduce because of the micro units?
Yeah, so the micro unit bonus was applied, but 30 spaces were required for this development. They were credited, if you will, 12 spaces as a result of their non-conforming rights from the previous use. So the expectation coming in was that they were going to seek a waiver of 18 spaces. So that is the amount required without any waivers except for the application of the micro unit, because the micro unit calculation is a lower calculation per unit because it is offset by the parking, the bicycle parking requirement. So 18 spaces is applying 100% of the requirement.
I got it.
So Commissioner Yonker was correct. If you were inclined to give them a 50% waiver, then it would be a 9-space agreement.
I'm comfortable with that. I'll amend my motion to 9.
Support? Oh, I don't?
You can't.
I will
He
support
withdrew
the
his
amended.
support.
Your chair.
No, I didn't say, I meant,
Yes.
I'm asking for support.
Yes.
I knew I couldn't support it.
I will re-support the amended motion to 9
Thank you.
spaces.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes with the additional agreement for 9 parking spaces contracted somewhere. We didn't even say how far away, if I understand this right. Good luck. No, I didn't mean to support.
Public comment?
Public comment.
Oh. Are there, I'm opening up for the public comment section of our agenda. If anybody wishes to speak about other items before the Planning Commission that are planning related, please feel free to come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Is there any further comments from commissioners? Hearing none, I adjourn this meeting.